Doctor Who's the longest-running sci-fi serial still in production, never mind the wilderness years when comics and novels were the main source of Doctor Who content. As such, its lore is very deep, very convoluted, and often quite messy. Considering the Doctor makes a big fuss, however, about the importance of preserving history, and since episodes with historical settings have been a big part of the show, since its inception really, it would be fair to say that history is an important part of the show. The concept of a shared human history that is worthy of protecting, or a universal history even in some cases. This makes the question I'm about to ask seem a little bit out of left field, but think about it really carefully and just try to answer, is there a such thing as history in the world of Doctor Who? Welcome to the All Trades Jack channel. I am the titular Titillating Jack, and I'm back with another Who-SA from the USA. In this series, I, an undereducated and big-headed American, discuss the British cultural institution that is Doctor Who, ad nauseum, all while trying not to become an enemy of the crown. Today's Who-SA, does history exist in Doctor Who? Like I said, I know that seems like an insane question to ask. There are historical figures throughout the show. It features different historical periods in great depth, and it makes a concentrated effort to preserve history in the narrative of the time travel. Time itself seems interested in this, since some moments are deemed to be fixed points, moments in history that can never be changed without destroying all of time, as seen in episodes like The Wedding of River Song. Even the future has some sort of set history, as the Doctor knows about the future, and how certain events will play out. The Doctor's foreknowledge of such thing as 51st century dating habits and the practices of the Villain Guard Corporation, and he's intimately familiar with at least 4 great and bountiful human empires, at least 15 New Yorks. He's seen the death of both the Earth and the universe, so there would appear to be a universal history, one which spans space and time from the beginning to the end, and it's recognized by the Time Lords, and by proxy the Doctor. It's even recognized by the Daleks, as we see one spares young Adelaide Brooke to ensure her place in history. Case closed. History exists. Well, obviously I wouldn't be here if I thought it was that simple, but you probably think that that's a done deal. There is history in Doctor Who. See, the problem is that it isn't just the longest running sci-fi show. It's also the oldest and longest, most prolific show about time travel specifically. This presents an interesting philosophical debate, since we can't talk about time travel without also discussing determinism. Put simply, in a deterministic universe, everything which is has always been. That which will be must be, and everyone is caught up in a web of fate, which holds the universe together. When a single person gets the ability to time travel, it puts the concept of determinism to the test. What happens if someone undoes that which has and must always be? If the traveler can change time, a la Back to the Future, then it's not a deterministic universe at all.
It means your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one.
If instead the universe is unchanged, but a branching reality is created a la Marvel, then we don't have a universe at all, but a multiverse. Doctor Who addresses both of these possibilities. The existence of fixed points, still points, and flux points in time allow for some flexibility for travelers in time to disrupt things without upending the universe, giving the world a sort of soft determinism. You can't erase Isaac Newton, but you could maybe change gravity to mavity, for instance. As for the multiverse, it's made clear by the Age of Steel and the Doctor's wife. The Doctor Who does have a multiverse, but not one created by time travel. There are many layered and parallel realities which have always been, and each has their own flow of time. Changing the past of one universe has no effect on parallel worlds. So it would appear that Doctor Who has a stable multiverse of independent, pseudo-deterministic timelines. But does it really adhere to that? To be clear, I am aware of how many bad faith arguments in the Doctor Who community hinge upon the idea of a fixed point in time being upended, and I'm not here to rehash any of those arguments. Because, I think most of those arguments are just an excuse to lampoon a specific writer, or a specific actor, or a character, or a plot point. And it's just, That's not what I'm interested in. My interest is in the response that loyal fans often clap back with in the face of these kinds of bad faith arguments. And it's kind of a bad faith defense. And I get it, it's a low effort attack, you throw up a low effort defense. But what you often hear is something that boils down to, well, of course there's continuity errors, it's a 60-year-old show. Yeah, sure, that sounds fair on the surface. Oh, Doctor Who has always broken its own rules. You're taking it too seriously. Well, I'm not here to decanonize River, or 13, or Clara due to their breaking of fixed points. I'm also not going to let those answers fly. The show has had multiple opportunities to reboot fully and redress those errors, and plenty of writers have come in the years since to paper over old plot holes with new revelations. I'm sure many come to mind. There is the Matt Smith era, which kind of soft rebooted with the 11th Hour. There was the pilot episode with Peter Capaldi. Those are, the classic jumping on points, but there's even the Ncuti Gatwa is another soft jumping off point. You have these kind of baked in. At any given point in time, you could write in answers, but often those answers just create more problems, like the cracks in time, which we'll talk about. In my opinion, we should be taking the show seriously, meeting it where it's coming from, which means taking the stakes of the show seriously, including the preservation of history, a thing so precious as to threaten the existence of all time, of time itself. I have two examples, one from Classic Who, the other from New Who, which complicate the otherwise straightforward paradigm of history and determinism as laid out in Doctor Who. One is the Pyramids of Mars. The other is the Devil's Cord. They both have effectively the same scene, so I'll describe both simultaneously. The Doctor's companion questions why they should fear the bad guy ending the world in the past, when clearly they are from the relative future, proving the bad guy does not succeed in the past. The Doctor then takes the companion to the future to show them what happens if they leave in the middle of events, and they are treated to a post-apocalyptic world. Now, if I wanted to be nitpicky, which often I do, this is where I'd point out that visiting that future would make the Doctor part of the events of that timeline, which we are repeatedly told he cannot do, because it causes paradox, and because it locks events in stone, like we saw in The Angels Take Manhattan. This would mean that even if they went back in time to stop this world-ending baddie, they would fail. Since the future has been seen, and it's been set in stone, and the future which they saw was a dead world. But, I'm not here to nitpick today. I'm here on a very specific mission, and I'm not going to get derailed. Because if we start nitpicking apart every paradox in Doctor Who, A, we'll be here all night, and B, I'd rather devote an entire video to that subject in the future, and not prematurely blow my material. Instead, I want to ask a more important question for the purposes of our conversation. Why are they showing up to a dead world when they should be arriving in a dead timeline? It's made abundantly clear that changing fixed points can end time itself. If, for example, Maestro destroys the world by ending music in the 60s, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of fixed points in time which are undone. Pete Tyler won't get killed by that car, and because he'll never exist. And that was a world-ending threat when those wraiths came. Adelaide Brooke won't go to Mars. River won't kill the Doctor, because none of them will ever be born. Since averting just one of those events has canonically broken time, undoing them all at once ought to have even more dire circumstances. So when the Doctor and companion leave the fight to see this possible future, they should find themselves in a timeless void. And in a timeless void, there is no substrate on which to travel back from whence you came. No time travel. It should be a death sentence to go to the future when you're in the middle of a world-ending battle that needs you every second. I've chosen these examples because they're the most visual. But once you begin to ask these kinds of questions, you'll see that history in Doctor Who is standing on very shaky ground. Let's stick with Adelaide for a second, since the show made a big deal of showing us that even Daleks know how important she is. And the Doctor was so super bad and wrong for thinking he knew better than the fixed moment that he was supposed to be protecting. Consider her story. She lives as a child during a Dalek invasion, the one which happened in the Stolen Earth two-parter. And seeing this Dalek spare her life had such a profound impact on her, she decided to follow it out into the stars. And that's a great story, and it works perfectly if you stop watching the show right there. Unfortunately, the season which follows makes it clear that the human race on the whole has been forgetting events such as Dalek invasions and Cyberman attacks, which they ought to remember. This is chalked up to the cracks in time, erasing moments, erasing people, swallowing ducks.
What is that?
It's a duck pond.
Why aren't there any ducks?
I don't know, there's never any ducks.
Then how do you know it's a duck pond?
It just is.
So, that either means the invasion of the Daleks, which inspired Adelaide Brooke, never happened, or it did happen and Adelaide Brooke doesn't remember it because her memories got swallowed up, or perhaps Adelaide got swallowed up. I don't know, but it doesn't really matter either way, does it? Because it leaves Adelaide without a motivation, or the world without Adelaide, and the fixed point is broken. But let's give the writers a break and abandon this fixed point angle for a second. Like I said, there are a lot of bad faith fixed point arguments on the internet, and I want to develop this idea beyond the surface level. So let's take it on faith that there is a reason that these fixed points can be fluxed around with. Maybe the reason the Doctor has only done this move of showing the outcome of the battle to his companions a couple of times is because he knew these moments specifically were a flux point, like in Hungry Earth, and he could bend the rules just enough. Maybe breaking time at a fixed point does cause a catastrophic failure, but perhaps amputating time ahead of a fixed point doesn't have the same effect. Maybe if something's written out of time forever, a la a crack, it doesn't have a fixed point to connect back to. I can imagine solutions even if the show doesn't provide them, but I'm not really trying to hit the copium, and I really want to get to the underlying question, which still remains unanswered. Is there any such thing as history in Doctor Who? Consider the most popular episode of Doctor Who of all time, Orphan 55. We are shown a possible future of Earth in which humans become monsters and the planet is ravaged by climate change and man-made ecological disasters on a global scale. Now, the technology we see on this version of Earth is not nearly as far removed from our own time as any one of a dozen future Earth timelines we'd seen in the show to that point. So the Earth might end prematurely, and it might not. There are two possible futures at least, and if such a major divergence could possibly occur, there must be other divergences possible too, which wouldn't break the universe.
But it's not decided. You know that. The future is not fixed. It depends on billions of decisions and actions and people stepping up.
We've already established the show ascribes to a kind of soft determinism, and we've given grace to our fixed points, so this should be okay. Except there's still one little issue, which is that the Doctor knows the future. As previously discussed, the Doctor knows intimate details about future events, like when the colony ships will leave Earth, and when the new Roman Empire rises, and when starts the next great bountiful human empire. He states these facts with the same level of certainty and bravado with which he explains anything else, like scientific facts or the past. Future or past, it's all a matter of historical fact to the Doctor. Our relative future could be Orphan 55, or it could be the new Roman Empire. But if the Doctor knows their history, then all the possible futures are just that, they're possibilities. They aren't the reality. We could end up as an Orphan 55. But if history is preserved, the history of the future, that is, the universal history we established the Doctor must have in mind, then it won't come to that because the Doctor has seen the correct future. This would take that sort of soft determinism and notch it up a couple of steps on the old Mohs hardness scale. It also raises new questions like, where in the universe or the multiverse do these timelines exist? How do you get to both Orphan 55 and the Great and Bountiful Human Empire? If the TARDIS can get to both futures must exist simultaneously. But that can't be the case, right? Since we already have a model for how the multiverse works in Doctor Who, and it doesn't really allow for branching realities such as this. Again, I can imagine solutions to this. A sequel episode, for instance, to Orphan 55, even years later, like 10 years from now, could show how this future is ultimately averted, right? Maybe they can bring back Ryan and he can have his very first character arc. I would love that for him. And then Orphan 55 wouldn't be a plot hole, but it would be the impetus for a future adventure which secures the proper flow of history. Unfortunately, until such an episode happens, this one still sticks out as a major plot hole. It could also be that the Doctor isn't as good as they think they are. After all, they get things wrong all the time. Maybe the future they think is the correct and natural future was actually only one of the possible futures. Just like Orphan 55, right? Or maybe the Time War shuffled the possible futures together in a way which invalidated all of the Doctor's previous knowledge. After all, it's the Ninth Doctor. It's Christopher Eccleston, who's fresh from the Time War, who routinely gets information wrong about the future. That also has to do with Dalek interference. Daleks straight from the Time War, so this explanation works. It's never been overt, but again, I can bend my mind around making this work until I hit the next wall. Maybe there is a way to square these circles, which relies on us accepting the Doctor's fallible knowledge. I can accept that, yeah, for now, and take the future for the nebulous time that it is. And that doesn't really solve the underlying issue of the present. If history must be preserved for the sake of universal existence and to maintain the integrity of time itself, there must be a present, some point between events set in stone, which must always be, and the possibilities in flux out in that nebulous future that must have some sort of ineffable quality that we can't quite understand as three-dimensional creatures. We know the future can diverge if we accept what we've seen and been told. So if both of these things are true, that history must be preserved and that the future is malleable, there must be a relative present. And there does appear to be a relative present in Doctor Who. What do I mean by that? The Doctor's adventures center around his relationships, his companionships with all sorts of gals from Earth and a few lads every once in a while, but they all meet in chronological order. He met people from the 60s in the 60s. He met people from the 70s in the 70s. There's a couple of random ones in there that are different when he traveled with Time Lords and children and robots and Leela. Man. What was I saying? In 2025, he's meeting people from 2025. I assume. We know that Ruby Sunday was in 2024. We'll see if they shake that up with this new season. I have some thoughts about it. Maybe we'll get around to that. And it's not just his companions. He and the Master also seem to meet mostly in chronological order, despite the fact that they are both time travelers. They are always there at the same relative present, with their same memories intact. Every battle catalog, they know each other perfectly, unlike the Doctor's relationship with other time travelers I could name. Does this mean there is a definitive present that beings such as the Time Lords can discern that we can't? And why is it aligned with us? The obvious answer is that it's a contrivance to keep the viewing simple and to always make sure that there's a relatively modern person for you and I to relate to use as a self-insert for us to go on the adventure with the Doctor, a modern guy or gal running around with the Doc. But that doesn't mean that I can't continue to look for an in-world answer to these questions. Because there still should be one, because they want me to care about the preservation of history, so I need to know what that is. And you can't know what history is if you don't know where the present is. On that note, here's a thought experiment. The Master is always somewhere. Even if they aren't being seen right then on screen, they're always out there in the world somewhere. Let's say the Doctor is in the relative present. Meanwhile, the Master is in the past. Since time can be rewritten, and there are many possible futures, The Master should be able to change the past and thereby change the relative future which the Doctor currently resides in. We have seen him do this as Rasputin, but what if the Master changes the past so that the world the Doctor is on is destroyed, just completely gone? What happens to the Doctor in the relative present? Would the world spontaneously end around them? Or would their memories change to think it had always been that way? What makes the future so malleable, and what makes the present different, or is it different? I can think of a few times the present has changed. Most recently, I believe, in the Church of Ruby Road, but neither the Doctor or anyone else capable of perceiving temporal shifts were in the relative present for us to see what that change would look like. In fact, the Disney era in particular has played fast and loose with these rules. I'm thinking specifically of Lizard Ruby. Let me know if you can think of any others, because I'm not really boned up on the expanded media. Obviously, I never got into the audio dramas or the books or anything like that, and I'm going to have a gap in knowledge, and we'll talk more about that and how that affects my philosophy of breaking down the lore. But let me know if you know any that I'm missing, that have more clear answers on what is the present and how time in the present is affected by other places in time. Just to be clear, I'm not taking issue with any of these stories, any one plot hole, or even the concept of plot holes in Doctor Who as a whole. As the diehards say, it's been on for 60 years, there will be plot holes. I'm willing to gloss over as many of them as I can do the mental gymnastics I can for the sake of enjoying the show, because I do enjoy the show. And I'm trying to meet it where it's at, but the problem is where it's at. It is trying to get me invested in this deep lore and history, and trying to convey that it's a thing worth protecting. It's important to the fabric of reality. And for that reason, a stable understanding of what that history is necessary to the equilibrium of the show. After all, how can we care about the history if we don't know what it is? We need to know what's set in stone, what is in flux, and what is happening in another reality entirely. What is the present? What is the past? And how malleable is the future? And the whiplash from season to season and showrunner to showrunner regarding the depiction of the way modern London perceives their own history makes it very difficult to give a about the stakes of protecting history. What it comes right down to is the show, it doesn't have a consistent relationship with determinism. The Doctor seems as invested in the soul of humanity as the preservation of history. They try to bring out the best in people because the choices people make matter, right? Free will and all of that. The Doctor leaves the human Silurian negotiations to let them figure it out for themselves. The Doctor also leaves the decisions during Day of the Moon to humanity. It is clear that choice matters in this world of fixed points and precious history. But the line between what is fated to be and what we have the ability to change, what the characters have the ability to change, it's blurry at best, and it's downright contradictory at its worst. Though I don't have any desire to take down specific stories or characters in this video, I can't ignore the ways which Doctor Who flip-flops on the subject of determinism. Individual plot holes can always be filled in with later stories and later revelations, but if more isn't done to consistently conceptualize the deterministic nature of history, there will always be a hole in Doctor Who. Not its plot, but one of its titular characters' most sacred duties, and one of the show's central tenets. No, not that tenet, no, the tenet of historical preservation. Doctor Who isn't a perfect show, but it's one of my favorites nonetheless. Determinism as it relates to higher life forms such as the Doctor may just be too big of a concept for a human brain to comprehend, and for TV writers to square. After all, even the greatest writers of all time struggle to get their heads around this idea. Take Milton's Paradise Lost, a masterpiece of English literary fiction. Even it is riddled with contradictions when a higher life form, God in this instance, butts up against the paradigm of free will and destiny that lower life forms such as you and I are caught up in. What do I mean by this? There's a companion piece to this video, the first of my series, called Size and Friction, where I attempt to teach myself what my professors at uni never did. How to write science fiction. The catch? I'm only analyzing works that my professors made me read. The first episode is up now, and I am talking Determinism in Paradise Lost. It's a different vibe from what we've got going on over here, but after all, I am all trades Jack, and it is my prerogative to dabble. Alright, I think that's it. I think I'm checking out. Did I miss anything? Nope, that's it. The script's gone. The script's empty. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Check the other one if you want to. If you watched all the end, if you watched all the way to the end, that's cool of you. If not, hey, that's cool of you too. Thanks for checking it out at all. And,
Don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe.
What?
Click below to subscribe.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe.
Well, how could I possibly forget that? For goodness sake. You got the message, haven't you?